Rustem Slobodkin, 23, the first of them to fall. Igor Dyatlov, 23, the group's leader and the most experienced hiker. It was probably his idea to try for the tents. Sineda Kolmogorova, 22. She was just a year older than I am now. She got the closest to the camp before succumbing, the only victim showing any sign of a struggle. She was missing her tongue and a large portion of her oral cavity. Ludmila Dublanina, 21. Nicholas Theobald Brignolel. Alexander Zolotarev. Alexander Kolevatov. The cause of death for all the victims was determined to be hypothermia. But Rustem and Nicholas also had severely crushed skulls, and Ludmila and Alexander Zolotarev had a number of broken ribs. But none of the bodies had any defensive injuries. No external injuries whatsoever. Somehow, something managed to crush the skulls of two men and shatter the ribs of Ludmila and Alexander, without leaving so much as a bruise.
The Devil's Pass is a 2013 found-footage horror movie from director Rennie Harland. It's an interesting piece of work. It goes into the story of a group of documentary filmmakers who are trying to investigate the very mysterious 1959 deaths of 9 Russian outdoorsmen, hikers, skiers, whatever they were. They were all found in various degrees of undress and various degrees of severe injuries, although most of them, it seems, may have just died of exposure. But the realities of what actually took place, nobody really knows. And the conspiracy theories range from UFOs to Bigfoot to, I don't know, dinosaurs and who knows what else, interdimensional beings. There's people claim lights in the skies, strange footprints in the snow. There's all sorts of different directions that this strange mystery has been taken in. And in the end, nobody knows. And because nobody knows, I expect there will be a lot of horror movies that based on true events and the Dyatlov Pass incident. Here, called The Devil's Pass, we get to know this group of filmmakers. They're actually more likable than usual. Some of them have their ups and downs, but a lot of times people complain in found footage movies that the characters aren't likable. I don't want to get into what they find and, obviously get into any kind of spoilers in this sort of rough outline take in it, but I will say that I think it's worthy of the journey. It's also interesting to talk about Rennie Harland because it's the most interesting movie that he's made in years. The 90s were like a great time to be Rennie Harland. He did this really bonkers ghost prison movie called Prison. He did nobody's favorite Nightmare on Elm Street movie, The Dream Master. He did a very successful sequel to Die Hard. He did Cliffhanger, which, might not be the most smart movie, but it is an entertaining movie. I have a soft spot for Cliffhanger. He almost bankrupted an entire studio with Cutthroat Island. He did this movie Long Kiss Goodnight, and of course, how can I not mention I just completely oversold it on a recent Shark episode. Deep Blue Sea, crazy B movie with a movie budget. So there was a time where he was kind of a go-to popcorn director, and he's been very inconsistent, and it was really cool to see him tackle this interesting concept with some panache. He's not working with a $250 million budget here, and he's really good at sort of giving us the environment and raising the stakes. At first there's the creepiness of the mystery of the Dyatlov deaths in of itself as explained to us. Then it's the actual environmental worries that they have to deal with. It's winter. They're camping out in the snow. There's a lot of survival issues to contend with. And then there's obviously the inevitable creepiness that will be encountered. I think it's a very well measured and decently paced found footage horror movie. Again, is it going to win people over? I don't know. Possibly. I think that it does have a very harrowing and exciting third act if people can get there. A lot of found footage movies tend to be sort of heavy in the action and the later into the movie, the deeper into the movie you get, the more sort of scares, the more kinetic, the more crazy things tend to become. And that makes sense. It's kind of hard to be, Hardcore Henry, where it's just kinetic shaky cam for the entire hour and a half. You're gonna kill your audience. So I think it's well measured in that regard, and I think it's a strong movie. It's just a strong horror movie, and it had been a while since I'd seen Rennie Harlan, at all, let alone doing something so interesting. So in third position, I am giving it to The Devil's Pass. A very interesting and different found footage horror movie.
You know I love you. I gave you all I had. But there comes a day when the quality of your life matters more than the time you've got left to live. These men came here and destroyed everything we worked for. We can't let them go back to New York, no, because they would spread lies about us and what we have here. Then their government would send soldiers here to burn our homes and take our children and kill us all. That's right, we can't let that happen. No, I will not let that happen. Now, I didn't want to hurt these men, but somebody will come looking for them. You know they will. So whether they go or whether they stay, this is the end for us.
It must be hard to hear that footage and not think of the Jonestown Massacre. I mean, if you don't think of the Jonestown Massacre when you hear that, then you probably just haven't heard of it somehow. Ty West's film The Sacrament is not about that specific tragedy. It sort of invents its own version of it, or sort of a nouveau version of a cult leader who is, brought his people to some place in Central America to build a utopia, but the utopia quickly becomes a prison, and the people become pushed into two different sides: people who kind of want to get out of it, and people who are so brainwashed that they don't realize, what they've given up and how much they're suffering. It's all for the good of this great leader. Ty West is an interesting filmmaker. I've enjoyed most of his films. He's got a reputation for taking his time, and I think maybe that is an earned reputation. If you are going to get into something like The House of the Devil or The Innkeepers, or indeed this movie, The Sacrament, I think you're going to be willing to meet the movie halfway and have patience and trust that it will pay off. Most of the time, Ty West pays off, and definitely in The Sacrament, he pays off. It's interesting because he has full cooperation with Vice. The entire movie is premised on the idea that it's a Vice documentary crew who are going to this settlement to see what this whole cult is about. They also have with them a person whose sister is in the cult, who he's hoping to at least talk to, if not talk her out of the cult, at least see, because people have lost family members to it. But I really like that structure, because Vice investigative reporting is really true things, so it really grounds it in reality. When I talk about the integrity of the perspective, they're really good with that. And the way that it starts being open interviews and it becomes more covertly filming things, and then it becomes sort of a documenting of what's happening on the grounds and what's happening to them as they're trying to escape or document, or both. It's a harrowing horror movie, and I think a lot of people might have missed that one. Another thing that is interesting to say about The Sacrament is some of the cast involved. A.J. Bowen is a regular fixture in horror movie cinema, and he plays one of the reporters. It's interesting because he usually plays less than sympathetic characters. He showed up in movies like The Signal and You're Next, and various other horror movies. He was in House of the Devil as well. But it was kind of nice to see him playing a character that was, whose motivations were not foggy or evil or misguided. I wanted to talk about the lead performance of Gene Jones, who's credited as father. I think that he is a terrifying terrifying performance of somebody who is, lost in his own narcissism and has been lying and sowing the seeds of this story for so long that he himself is the biggest, truest believer of all of them. You may recognize that actor. He has a very famous scene in No Country for Old Men where he is asked to call a coin toss between he and Javier Bardem. He's an old owner of a gas station who encounters this evil man in No Country for Old Men. Here he's given a full, character to play, and he is so good in it. It's powerful, harrowing stuff. Also, this, as much as I respect and love the movie, is not a movie that I would call necessarily fun. There is real grit, there's real harshness to it. I mean, I don't want to spoil things, but yeah, things do get ugly, people do die, and there are some really hard to watch things that you're subjected to, and hard to shake things. It slowly kind of closes its fist over you, and the suffocating atmosphere and the horrifying, you feel like you're witnessing something you shouldn't be witnessing, and it's kind of a haunting movie as a result. And it feels like it should be some elaborate fiction, but even though this particular event isn't based on a true thing, we know that things like this have and likely will happen. So I thought that the choice of the forced perspective really helped the narrative in this case. It wasn't something that got in the way. They were there with cameras to film things that people didn't want to be filmed, so they were going to keep rolling to the bitter end if that's what it came to. And you're not sure if you want to see what you're seeing, but you can't look away. That means it's compelling filmmaking.
Well,
yeah, you said that you have 30 of these people.
I have about 60 people with some kind of blister and lesion outbreak. Some of them went into anaphylactic shock. I have wart
excuse me, you
overgrowth.
said now you have 60
I just
cases?
saw 3 people with their tongues half gone.
Okay, that's a lot of information. Did you administer methicillin to the lesion victims?
Yeah, of course I gave him methicillin. It had no response.
What do you mean?
It kept spreading
In how many cases?
in all of the cases.
Okay, that's important.
Yeah, I know that's important because they still have spreading lesions. Do you have any new information for me?
Not at this time. This could be any number of things. It could be fungal or bacterial. We had a tropical fungus outbreak last year in Vancouver. Spread in about 3 hours, actually.
Vancouver, 3 hours?
Yeah. We lost about 30 people died, I think, but it was just the fact that we hadn't seen it in the Northern Hemisphere before. Now, I did want to ask you, did you say that you had people with half their tongues gone?
Yeah, hold on. You didn't get pictures? Did you send those pictures to the CDC? You did? You should have an attachment there with pictures that we sent you. Do you have them?
The Bay is a positively chilling 2012 ecological horror film from prolific director Barry Levinson. This one gets you right in the gut, you guys. Because even though its over-the-top creature feature aesthetic might not read as immediately credible as like the size of the parasites or the creatures that they're talking about here, I think that much more likely they would be microscopic, you wouldn't see them, but that adds to the ick factor of the movie so much. And the way that the footage is compiled using a combination of security footage from hospitals, a journalist who's both covering the epidemic and the attempt to cover up the epidemic by the powers that be, and various home movie cameras and recovered video from the people who were there celebrating the 4th of July in 2009 in Claridge, Maryland on the Chesapeake Bay, where something terrible is swimming around in the water and is starting to have an effect on the population. Barry Levinson is a crazily bipolar director as far as I'm concerned. I mean, he's got some hits and he's got some real puzzling misses. I mean, even his misses are kind of interesting, but consider the fact that the same man who directed Diner, The Natural, Good Morning Vietnam, Bugsy, Wag the Dog, also directed movies like Toys, The Strange and Forgotten Jimmy Hollywood, Sphere, Disclosure, Michael Crichton adaptation and a bizarre comedy called Envy. There's a lot of strange ups and downs to Barry Levinson, and he's doing a lot of television work and biopics for HBO more recently in his career. But in 2012, out comes this really interesting forced perspective narrative ecological horror. And it's multi-branched. There's a lot of characters, and you don't know who to cheer for, who to get attached to, or who exactly your main protagonist is. But what it does is sort of successfully gross you out and sort of induce the paranoia, that the helplessness that such a disaster would be. Like, can you leave? Does that get you safe, or are you just spreading whatever this is to another place? How can you help those that are infected without getting infected yourself? And why are the people in charge as much of a problem as they are help to this terrible disaster? I mean, there's a lot of meat to chew in this movie. It works as an effective horror movie, and it's eerily plausible outside of, like I said, the gross creature feature aspect to it. But you kind of believe that people would try to keep this a secret as long as they could until it was out of control, to the point that it was almost too late. And again, it's a chilling perspective on a natural disaster, and it's a credible thing. Like we depend on the powers that be. If a flood happens, or an asteroid hits, or if some terrible hole opens up, an earthquake happens and the ground is torn open, we always expect that there's some sort of apparatus there to help us. And either the apparatus isn't there to help us, or it can in some cases actively be there to hinder. It's a paranoid, gross out, forced perspective thriller from a prolific and interesting filmmaker in Barry Levinson. And in my first phase arguments for the credibility of found footage films, I'm putting The Bay by Barry Levinson at number 1. And if we can say that people like Barry Levinson and George Romero and M. Night Shyamalan and Adam Green and Ty West, if these people are interested in found footage, does that not suggest that maybe it's not strictly for amateurs, and that maybe, just maybe, there's something to the genre?